Hey yo, what up, guys and gals, and whoever else is listening to this show? Welcome back to Cheat Day Sports. Um, Today we're just gonna be going over some games that happened. We had some action last night. And we're just gonna be talking, discussing the Big Ten, and kind of picking who we think is gonna be in the Big Ten championship game. So let's just get right into it. Let's take a look. So these are the games from yesterday on Halloween. We had Northern Illinois and Central Michigan. Central Michigan came out with a dub. Shout out. I actually have it written down right here. Shout out to Nari Biggins for Central Michigan. He coming up with a big pick with, I think it was like a minute and a half left. Pretty much sealed the win. In some tough and snowy conditions. And then Toledo got the win over Buffalo, which, Toledo is looking like they're just going to run through all of the MAC. They didn't have that loss to Illinois at the beginning of the year. We could be thinking like, oh, we might have a Tulane situation how we did last year. We still have Air Force. I think Air Force is ranked 25th in the CFB playoff rankings now. So, shout out Michigan, or shout out Air Force, and let's see what you guys can do. But what we have today too, we have some more action. Love it. Some 38 degrees and 41. We have Ball State and Bowling Green playing. I don't really know too much. I'm gonna go with Bowling Green on this. They're favored by 4.5. I would definitely take the under at 39.5. And then with Kent State and Akron, this is the battle for the bottom of the MAC, pretty much in both divisions. We have Akron a 4-point favorite, but give me Kent State. We'll pick them, get their first win in conference play this year. We'll see how well those picks last. But now, what I do want to talk about is I have the CFB rankings up for the playoffs right now. I just thought, everybody's been talking about these. All that really matters is the top 10 right now. Everybody outside the top 10 is kind of like, oh, can we get in? Especially the top 13, because once you get down to LSU, everybody else has 2 losses. I think besides Air Force I think Air Force is 25th. But if we look at the top 5, I really don't have a problem with the top 5. In my 1, 2, and 3, you could interchange all 3 of those teams. I think. Ohio State with their wins over Penn State and Notre Dame, and they've had the toughest schedule. And Kirk Herbstreit said today that strength of schedule does play, is a big factor in these rankings. So I think all 3 of those you could flip, especially Michigan and Georgia. But if it were me, I would flip Washington and Florida State. I would have Washington at 4 and Florida State at 5. Just with Washington's win over Oregon, I think, that could be the best win in the country. I think, but yeah, it's just interesting. We still have 4 weeks left, so these are all going to be changing drastically, and hopefully we see some craziness. But I do want to talk about the Big 12. Not the Big 12, the Big 10 this week, just because everything that's going on with Michigan. I think that with all the drama, with the stealing signs, sending that guy on the sidelines, and they say you could have been spotted on the Central Michigan sideline, which I don't know how he gets in there and just is in there with all the coaches. That'll be interesting to see if he was actually on over there looking and stealing Michigan State sign when Central Michigan was playing them. But I think if you're the NCAA, you need to crack down now on Michigan. It can't be 5, 6, 7 months from now. It can't be in February or even in the summer. Like they have to crack down if they're going to do anything. If it comes out that they did anything, that's great. But if they do have stuff that they have found already, you need to crack down on them now. Just because if Michigan wins out, say they win the Big Ten outright, make it to the playoffs, end up winning the national championship, and then a couple months later comes around, they're like, oh yeah, we're actually gonna take all your wins away from the season and the national championship. I'm like, well, that doesn't do anything. You put an asterisk there, and I mean, they still won the national championship. It's the same thing with Reggie Bush's Heisman. Like when all that was going down, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna take the Heisman away from him." I'm like, okay, he still won the Heisman. Everyone still considers him a Heisman Trophy winner. It's just dumb. If the NCAA is gonna crack down, they need to do it now rather than later. Just put a bowl ban on for right now, and if nothing comes out of it, then okay. But you have to do something. You can't just let it drag out for months and months and say until after the playoffs and after the national championship. You just can't do that. But other than that, what I think is more interesting, the Big Ten East, I really don't see how Ohio State beats Michigan, especially so for the East. I think the East is kind of set in stone. I don't see Ohio State, even say they are stealing signs, even if they're not stealing signs, whatever, I still think Michigan's the better team. So I think Michigan wins the East, but what I think is interesting is the Big Ten West, just because you have 4 teams at 3-2 right now that, I mean, anybody, especially with that whole Iowa and Minnesota game in the fair catch, that was bad. Since Iowa lost that game, the West is completely wide open. If we just take a look at everybody's schedule, I mean, if I were to pick, I still think Iowa is going to win the West and make it to the Big Ten championship game. But if we take a look at everybody's schedule, if we take a look, Minnesota plays Illinois, which they can win. Purdue, Ohio State, they're not going to beat Ohio State, and then Wisconsin. So I think you can count Minnesota out. I don't think, because they already have one for sure loss on there right now. And then I think the Wisconsin, they could lose as well. The reason I'm saying Iowa can win the West is because their schedule is the easiest out of those 4 teams. So they play Northwestern, they play Rutgers, Illinois, and then at Nebraska. At Nebraska I think is going to be their toughest game. But I see them winning out the rest. And if we take a look at Wisconsin, they play at Indiana or Northwestern, which I think they should win those 2 games. And then they play Nebraska and at Minnesota, which, I think Wisconsin will beat Minnesota, but that Nebraska game, I think that's a toss-up. So, who knows? Wisconsin could end up going 4-0, or they could go 2-2, which I really don't see. I see them going either 3-1 or 2-2. Iowa's the only one I see winning the rest of their games. So I think it's a safe bet to go Iowa, Michigan for the Big Ten championship game. That's my pick. I don't see it going any other way. The only other team, even Nebraska. If we take a look at Nebraska's schedule, which who knows, Nebraska could end up winning out, which they play, but they already lost to Minnesota, so Minnesota would have to lose another game, and they have to win out, which they play Michigan State, which they should win. Maryland, I think, is a sneaky good team. I think Maryland is to the Big Ten is what Arizona kind of is. I think Arizona is a lot better team than Maryland, but I mean, Maryland has been in some of these games, and I think they can win a couple. Um, but then they play at Wisconsin and then Iowa. So I think, given like the strength of schedule for these last four games for these teams, Iowa definitely has the easiest. And that's why I'm going Iowa, Michigan for the Big Ten championship game. But yeah, those are my picks. If we just take a look at the Big Ten slate for this week, and we're just looking at it, I'll give you my picks. I'm not saying this isn't like gambling advice. I know nobody that watches this is big gamblers, and who knows if anybody makes it to the end. If you make it to the end of the video, drop Big Ten down in the comments and drop your predictions. You know, I want to see everybody's predictions, and we can discuss. We can have some discussions in the comments. But yeah, let's see. Of course, I mean, I'll have Ohio State beating Rutgers, but I mean that could be a tricky game, especially, you know, it's at Rutgers, you know, it's in New Jersey. It could Ohio State. They had a tough game against. I think they played Indiana. Was it Indiana they played last week? Or no, they played Wisconsin. So, yeah, but I mean, 24-10. I think it could be a tough game, but I do think Ohio State makes it out of there. With Wisconsin and Indiana, I'm going Wisconsin. I mean, Indiana could give them some trouble. I think they're a pretty good two-loss team, but I feel pretty confident with Wisconsin. If we look at Nebraska, Michigan State, I think this pretty easy. Michigan State's terrible this year. Like, they could be the worst team in the country. I mean, there's like they get like they could be up there with Sam Houston State. I think you put those two together, that and you could have an instant classic for the battle of the bottom of the FBS. But I'm gonna go Nebraska in this game. I think Nebraska just walks all over them. I think even though it is in East Lansing, I don't think Michigan State gets the win. If we look at Penn State, Maryland, I think this could be a tricky game for Penn State, because I think actually Penn State played Indiana last week, and it was a 9-point game, but still, I think, especially because it's in Maryland. I think that this could be a tricky game for Penn State, because all their focus, I don't think they're focused on Maryland at all. So I'm actually going to take Maryland to get the huge win. This would be huge for Maryland, but I'm going to pick Maryland for this, and we'll see if it actually lands. Let's see if we go Illinois, Minnesota. I don't think Illinois is very good. I mean, obviously, but I don't think they have quite what it takes to beat Minnesota. I mean, they got a gritty win, which, I mean, they really shouldn't have against Iowa, but they did get a win. I think Minnesota's just a little too tough, especially since it's in Minnesota. I'm going with the Golden Gophers on that one. If we look at Iowa Northwestern, I don't think this is going to be close at all. I mean, it's at a neutral site, but I mean, it's still in Illinois, so take that for what it is. But I think that Iowa's just mad. You know, they just fired their offensive coordinator, so we'll see what that does for them. But I'm going to take Iowa. I think that's a pretty safe bet. I don't see Northwestern beating them at all. And if we look at Purdue, Michigan, Michigan's a 32.5-point favorite, which, I mean, that's insane. I don't think Purdue, I could see Purdue not even scoring on Michigan. I think in my eyes, I mean, I think Oregon could be like right there with Michigan. I think if it's me, I think it's Michigan and Oregon for the best two teams in the country right now. I know Oregon has one loss, but I think Michigan and Oregon are the two best teams in the country right now. I think Michigan's just going to prove it again on Saturday, why they're the third best. And I mean, I think they're the best team in the Big Ten. I think they're just going to prove it again on Saturday. Man, just keep climbing the college football playoff rankings. But yeah, that's all I got for today. If you guys want to drop some comments down, put your picks down in the comments. I want to hear all the takes. If there's a take you guys want me to talk about, if there's a conference you want me to talk about, I'm going to try to talk about all the conferences every single week. But yeah, if there's something specific you want me to talk about, with anything, I mean, if it's college basketball, college football, whatever, just drop it in the comments and we can have a discussion about it. But I'll catch you guys all later. Peace.